Ronald Acuña Jr. is getting closer and closer to his return with the Atlanta Braves. What does that mean for the rest of the roster? I'll answer that question and many more on today's Mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at shortstopball. Follow the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button now. Hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. Appreciate all your support that you give me there on the video side. For those on the audio side, make sure you leave me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can listen to Locked On Braves on pretty much any podcast platform out there. Thank you so much for your support as well and making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. We have come to the end of another week here at Locked On Braves, so it is our traditional Friday mailbag podcast. Got about 20 questions to answer on today's episode. A lot of them have to do with Ronald Acuña Jr.'s return, what it means for the rest of the lineup. Several questions about the pitching staff as well, and the Braves could maybe look to trade a starter at some point. So we'll get into all of those on today's Mailbag podcast, which is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Let's jump into the questions here. And for those who don't know, you want to submit any questions to be answered on the podcast, you can look for my post from LockedOn_Braves on X. I will ask those about every Friday morning. Respond to that post with your questions to be answered on the show. I'm about to open it up to Instagram as well. For those of you who don't have X, I'll start taking some questions from there too. But this one from Joey Milby, who says, we should not and will not do it, but would Bryce Elder be better off being traded? It seems like good or bad, he just can't keep a spot in our rotation, but watching some of these other teams, he could be their third or fourth starter. And here's my issue with trading Bryce Elder, and it's always been my issue with trading Bryce Elder, and it's not that I'm against moving him if it makes sense, but just a couple of weeks ago, it feels like we were scrambling to find a fourth and a fifth starter in this rotation. And now here we are, it's healthy for the moment, and we have an excess of starting pitchers and pitchers that are throwing the ball well. I think it's still very much valuable to have Bryce Elder in the system. And again, we probably wouldn't have said this at the beginning of the year after he was coming off, a rough season and a half. But I still think having that depth of a Bryce Elder who can come up and at least give you 5 quality innings if needed is still too valuable to trade. Again, you get to the trade deadline, all your pitchers are healthy, looking good. It makes sense. You could move Bryce Elder for a nice bullpen piece that you need. Okay, maybe at that point, but certainly not right now. And again, pitchers are very volatile. They're healthy right now. Knock on wood. There's some wood back here somewhere. But that's going to change. And that's going to happen. You are going to need Bryce Elder as the season goes on. And I still think they should probably go to a 6-man rotation at some point. If they come into another long stretch of games like they just got out of, I think it would be wise for them to go to a 6-man rotation to limit the innings and stress on their starting pitchers, who they're going to have to limit the innings of A.J. Smith-Shawver this year. They're going to have to limit the innings of Grant Holmes this year. Spencer Strider, who's coming back from injury, which you may have already done that by him missing basically the first month and a half of the season. But you're going to have to limit the innings of some of these starters as is. So you're going to need Bryce Elder again at some point. And again, just odds are somebody else in this rotation is going to get injured at some point this season. So I would not trade Bryce Elder. He's your best depth that you have. Look, if you trade Bryce Elder, something happens in the rotation. Who are you going to? Who are you going to right now? Are you going to give Lucas Braun or J.R. Ritchie a chance? Hurston Waldrop's been throwing the ball a little bit better lately. I mean, those could be really good pitchers. I'm not saying they can't be, but you just don't have a lot of proven quality depth at the big league level in your system right now, really even in the upper levels in the case of J.R. Ritchie and Lucas Braun. So there's just not a ton of great depth there. Again, you're talking about a Davis Daniel, a Nathan Wiles. Those are the other names that are right behind Bryce Elder. And again, Bryce Elder's been great lately. And I think he's really he's your sixth guy. I mean, he's the only other guy that you really trust. Another couple more from Joey. He says, what does Lara need to do at AAA to get the call? I believe he is number 2 on the list behind Craig Kimbrell. Should be bringing someone up. Dodd would be the lefty if we lose one, but I think Giancarlos is really close and will be a force for us soon. I was surprised to see how aggressively they were in moving him up. And I think that speaks to the fact that, as we've talked about a lot here on the podcast, the Braves have several arms in their farm system right now that they're trying out as starters. But if you were to move them to relievers, they could probably be on the Braves fairly quickly. Lara being one of those, Blake Burkhalter being one of those. Drew Hackenberg's had a pretty tough year as a starter. I think he's somebody you could transition to the bullpen if needed and move him through pretty quickly. I think for Lara, it's just, can he throw enough strikes even in a 1-inning stint? Obviously, the stuff is there and fantastic. I think it's just knowing that he can go out there and not have an inning where he just completely loses it and walks in a run or something like that. So I think that's really the only thing you need to see from Lara at AAA before maybe he's given a shot at some point. And that's always going to, I shouldn't say always, but that's going to be an issue for him, is just the command. But if you see some improvement in that as a reliever, and obviously the stuff is going to play up. I mean, it's 101 wipeout slider stuff from Giancarlos Lara. I think we could see him, get a shot here pretty soon. And then last one here from Joey. He says, when Ronnie comes back, is it time to talk about Eli White getting some time on the dirt? Certainly. And especially if the struggles for Ozzie continue. And even if they don't, I think it's probably wise to give Ozzie a day here or there, against a righty starter, and let Eli White play. I know that doesn't make sense with Eli White being a righty, but he's got his splits, at least for this year, are even righty versus lefty. And we know that Ozzie is better from the left side. So just looking for those spots to get Eli White in the lineup and maybe give Ozzie a breather. I think it makes sense. I don't think you put him at shortstop. Maybe if Riley needs a day, which is doubtful, he wants to play every day. But I think there is an opportunity at second base to get Eli White into the lineup even after Ronald returns. And look, I think Eli White's just your starting left fielder over Alex Verdugo when Ronald comes back. And I think Verdugo should be on the bench, but we'll see how that all plays out. Owen Ray, do we see J.R. Ritchie by the All-Star break or end of year? He's been on fire. I know he just got to Double-A, but still. You all know, you listen to the podcast for a while. J.R. Ritchie's been one of my favorite prospects for a couple of years now. I think I've had him in my top 4 in the past. I think I did going into this year too. But I don't think he's going to get fast-tracked like we've seen others from Double-A to the show like that. I think if you said the All-Star break, maybe, if he goes up to Double-A and just dominates, which remember, Double-A is a very good league. The Southern League is a very good league for pitchers. So it would not surprise me at all if he were to go up there and just continue to dominate. But I do think they're probably going to be a little bit more careful with him. It's his first full year back from Tommy John surgery. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little bit more careful with him. But I'd say before the All-Star break, I'd say that's doubtful, but maybe after the All-Star break, again, if he's dominating the Southern League for a little while, maybe they even bump him up to give him a taste of AAA really quickly. Obviously, they have no qualms with moving somebody up straight from Double-A. But I'd be a little surprised if we see J.R. Ritchie before the All-Star break. And honestly, hopefully we don't, because that means something's gone wrong in the rotation as is. While I love J.R. Ritchie, and I certainly want to see him get that opportunity, hopefully we don't see him, because I hope the guys in the rotation are doing their job and there's just not a spot for him. All right, several more questions that I need to get to on today's episode, more about the pitching staff, Drake Baldwin, and Acuña's return. We'll get into the rest of those questions here next. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, and smell of the ballpark food. And if you're looking for to go last minute to a game, a Braves game, whatever the case may be, Gametime makes getting tickets easier than ever. They have last minute deals, all in pricing, no surprise at the checkout, and lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as Gametime gets closer, meaning you can score an incredible deal at the last minute. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On, and as the MLB season is underway, I can count on them to grab tickets at the last minute to meet my needs. The Game Time Picks feature means finding the best deals is effortless. It filters out all the fluff and highlights the top discounts in the stadium. Plus, I love that I can preview my exact seat and what the view is going to look like. Very important when going to baseball games. You want to know what exactly you're going to be staring at. You got the skyline view, whatever the case may be, or you're going to an old ballpark like Wrigley or Fenway. You want to make sure that your view is not obstructed. You can see that right within the app. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONMLB at checkout with Game Time for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out the guys over at Locked On MLB. They'll get you caught up from everything happening around Major League Baseball each and every day. We'll be back next week with 5 more episodes of Locked On Braves. So, again, make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. The next one here from Wriggler2 says, will we see a Baldwin get DH days soon? With a hot Baldwin and cold Ozuna, why wouldn't we? Well, because Ozuna's been your best player for the last 2 years, and you know he's going to come out of it at some point. So I don't think we're going to see Baldwin get many DH at-bats. And if anybody is going to take Marcell Ozuna's at-bats in the DH spot right now, I think it's probably going to be Ronald when he returns. But I still think you're going to, unless there's an injury or something, Ozuna's going to be in that DH spot pretty much every day. So I don't think that's going to be the way that we see Baldwin's bat get in the lineup a little bit more. Hayden Harris, do the Braves need Sean Murphy? Well, yes, absolutely. You're not going to catch every day anyway as a catcher. So you need 2 really good catchers. And the Braves have been fortunate to have 2 really good catchers for a long time. Now, obviously, Sean Murphy, you're paying him a good bit of money. And if you end up going with Drake Baldwin as your primary catcher, which they might need to do in the interim, then it's going to be, a tough pill to swallow to have Sean Murphy as your backup and a guy that you're paying, I believe, $15 million this year. And like I've said, needing to get Drake Baldwin more playing time is not in any way a slight of Sean Murphy, who has been really good. I know he's cooled off since he came back from injury and was hitting a home run almost every other at bat, and he has cooled off some, but he's been really good too. And the Braves have 2 good catchers, and I think that's a good problem to have. Seeing a lot of people talking about trading Sean Murphy, and I just don't know that that's the wisest decision, at least not right now. We can discuss it in the offseason, but I don't think that's the wisest move to make at the moment, and just hand the reins completely over to a rookie catcher. As well as he has handled everything, I like having Sean Murphy. And again, I think he's a good player. PJ's Braves, I asked this about Matt Olson earlier in the season, but why all the Sean Murphy hate? Would there be as much if Baldwin was not producing at the plate? No, there absolutely would not be. Like I just said, the talk about getting Drake Baldwin's bat in the lineup right now, in my mind, is not an indication or a slight at Sean Murphy, as it is Drake Baldwin's just really good at the moment, and he's hot right now, and you have to get his bat in the lineup. It really doesn't have anything to do with Sean Murphy, who, as I said, has produced and been a good hitter for the Atlanta Braves too, and has certainly brought a lot of power to the lineup since coming back from injury. So again, it's the new shiny toy. It's the rookie, and he's hitting right now, and that's fun and exciting, and fans want to see that. I want to see that, and I haven't seen a lot of Sean Murphy hate. I've seen people, again, throughout the idea of maybe trading him just because, it's redundant to have 2 guys that are seemingly need to be primary catchers, and people thinking you can get some value out of that. But I haven't really seen the Sean Murphy hate out there like I see for Matt Olson, just because he's not Freddie Freeman. But there's been that level of hate for Sean Murphy in the past because he's not William Contreras. But I haven't seen it in these conversations between Drake Baldwin and Murphy. I think most people understand that wanting Drake Baldwin to play more is not necessarily a slight of Sean Murphy, who's also swung a pretty good bat this year. Jordan Griffey, when Profar is back, does the fact that he cannot play in October as a condition of his suspension affect the amount of playing time he receives? I don't know. I know that's not the answer that you all listen for me to give, but I just really don't know. Again, a lot of it depends on the state of the outfield when he comes back. are Eli White and Alex Verdugo still producing? And if so, do you roll with those guys over Profar when he comes back? When Profar comes back, how is he producing? What does he look like? You're talking about a guy that hasn't played in 3 months, and who knows at this point? He got popped in spring training, not last year when he was also tested, but who knows what Profar is at this point? Was he getting away with something last year? And that's why he had a breakout season. At this point, we don't know what type of player Profar is. I tend to think he's going to play because at the end of the day, the Braves have to get to the postseason. And if Profar is the best option to help them get there, then you worry about what you do in the outfield once you get there. So I tend to think he's going to play, especially if Verdugo and Eli White have kind of cooled off at that point. And again, we're still a good ways away from that being the case, from Profar returning. Owen Ray says, when is the right time to offer AJ Smith-Shawver 8 years, $100 million? A lot of talk about this too, with the hot start for AJ Smith-Shawver this year and him kind of figuring it out. At what point do they give him an extension? I'd hold off on that. And look, I love AJ Smith-Shawver. He was my top ranked prospect. I do remember that one. But he was my top ranked prospect coming into the year. I think the potential is very high. Giving guaranteed money long-term to pitchers is generally not a wise move to make. Look at Spencer Strider, and that contract's not going to kill the Braves by any means, but he just had a major surgery and had to miss an entire year in the first 2 months of this season. It's just pitchers are so volatile, and you never know when they're just going to miss a year and a half. And I just think it's a bit unwise to go ahead and hand out deals now. You got time. You want to do that with AJ Smith-Shawver. You can do it down the road. And I just don't think that we're there yet with him. He's been great lately, don't get me wrong, but it's not how I see him dominating. It's not in the same fashion as even a Spencer Strider. Who again, Spencer Strider, for all of those who forgot, was probably the best pitcher in all of baseball before he got hurt and was the NL Cy Young favorite going into 2024. So I don't see that level for AJ Smith-Shawver. You don't see that level for many pitchers. So I'd be hesitant to offer that type of extension for AJ Smith-Shawver right now. Matt Karch says, we are a really bad road team. I know the 0-7 start doesn't help, but we also have lost road series to Tampa, Toronto, and Pittsburgh. If we don't start improving on the road, we will be a meddling 500 team all year. Why do you think we struggle so much on the road? Again, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you another I don't know answer to this, other than just not as comfortable on the road as you are at home. You aren't able to hack the PitchCom system as easily on the road as you can at home. So I don't know. I really don't. It is frustrating though, especially the Tampa, really all of those series. I mean, the Toronto and Pittsburgh series in particular are very frustrating. You won the first game of that Toronto series and you had Schwellenbach and Strider lined up after that, and you couldn't close the deal. The Pittsburgh series just completely frustrating, as that was a bad team, just fired their manager. You miss Paul Skeens and you're unable to win it. It's just, for whatever reason, this isn't a good road team. And sometimes that's just the case. It hasn't been a good day team either. And again, sometimes when those things happen, I feel like it's more mental than it is physical. When you see those types of issues, a team that's just struggling on the road, or a team that's struggling at a particular time of day, I think it's just more of a mental thing than it is a physical thing. Dustin Mounts, do you think Eli White and Verdugo become a platoon with the recent games of Verdugo sitting for lefties, or does one player get the bulk of the playing time? Both have kind of cooled off some. So I hinted at this earlier in what my decision would be. I play Eli White every day, and I'd put Verdugo on the bench, get him some occasional starts in there too against a righty. But I go with Eli White every day when Acuña returns. I just think he does more for you at the plate. I think Verdugo has I know they both cooled off, but I think Verdugo even more so. And I just like Eli White's bat at the bottom of the lineup better, and just because of his speed and versatility that he brings to the team. Look, Eli White can also be a versatile player off the bench who can come in and pinch run, pinch hit, and play anywhere. But you're asking me to pick right now who should get the starting left field job when Ronald returns. I go with Eli White every day and just look for some opportunities to get Verdugo in there and just ride Eli White until he completely falls apart. Again, I know he's cooled off, but I still think he's doing some valuable things for the team. Another one from Matt Karch, who says, I'm not going to blame a hitting coach for this team's struggles since we have had 2 different ones over the last 2 years and the ineptitude continues. Knowing this, were they better off just keeping Seitzer instead of using him as a scapegoat? He is doing well in Seattle. I still stand by the decision to shake things up and get a different voice. I said when the Seitzer stuff happened, kind of like Matt is saying, I think he was just a scapegoat for a disappointing season. You don't have a guy who coached one of the best offenses historically in 2023. And I think we get it all at this point. Baseballs were juiced for everybody in 2023, but still you don't have a hitting coach who helps lead one of the best offensive teams ever. And then all of a sudden he forgets how to coach hitting the next year. I think it was a combination of just a lot of things that went wrong in 2024. Some of those bad habits have continued into 2025. So again, I never thought Kevin Seitzer was the problem, but I did believe in making the decision just because I think after a while you do need a different voice. So I'm still okay with moving on from Kevin Seitzer, but I also just never believed that he was the problem for why the offense didn't score in 2024. Coach Gordon Bombay, when Ronald gets back, who do you think our lineup? Who do you think our lineup looks like? I think maybe what do you think our lineup looks like? Who should be the 9-hole guy? I'd like for it permanently to be Harris or White, depending on matchups. I like speed. I agree with you. I think it needs to either be Eli White or Michael Harris. And maybe if you're facing, certainly if you're facing a lefty, I'd probably put Michael Harris down there, depending on where Michael Harris is too. I mean, Michael Harris is going to heat up at some point. And when that's the case, I'm fine with them being in the 6 or 7 spot. So probably either Eli White or Nick Allen in the 9 spot. You probably lead off with Acuña, Acuña, Riley, Olsen, Ozuna, something like that. And then Drake Baldwin, Sean Murphy, whoever you're going to put in that spot, Ozzie, Harris, Allen, Eli White, something like that. I might be forgetting somebody in there, but that's kind of what I go for. You got your top 4 in Acuña, Riley, Ozuna, Olsen, however you want to configure them, probably based on who's swinging the better bat at that time. And then I think you put the catchers behind them and either Sean Murphy or Drake Baldwin. I don't love putting Ozzie and Harris back to back. So you could maybe go Ozzie, Eli White, Michael Harris, Nick Allen, something like that. But that's probably how I would write out the lineup. All right, still got several more questions to get to, a lot more than I thought on today's episode. We'll take one more break and I'll get back and finish answering those. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. But if you've moved on from the NBA season and you are all in on Major League Baseball, they have World Series odds out there, end of season awards. We talked about those yesterday, how FanDuel has AJ Smith-Shawver as the front runner right now to win the National League Rookie of the Year with Drake Baldwin right behind him. You can check out all of those odds over at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Jumping back into the questions, Caden Hurd says, what more do we need to see to get Ronald back sooner? I think the biggest hurdle for Ronald right now is going to be the defense. He's got to play in the field. Like I said, if it wasn't for that, I think he would be back already. If the DH position was open, I think he'd already be there. It's just a couple of games, and it's at the FCL level and one at the AAA level, but the bat looks pretty good already. This from Grant McCauley, who said, Ronald Acuña Jr. said his knee felt good running. He's still getting reacquainted in the field and will continue to work on that. There were a couple of misplays. The swing feels good, and he is excited to be back on the field. So the defense is going to be the biggest thing for Ronald, being able to handle that. Look, they put Jorge Soler out there in the past. It can't be much worse than that. But just him being able to manage playing in the field on back-to-back days. He's going to have to play. We're going to have to see that first before he gets moved up, that he plays in the field back-to-back days for full games. But that's going to be the biggest hurdle. I think the bat, is probably ready. He's been hitting since spring training. We know that. And so it is just getting up to speed. But the biggest thing for him is going to be getting reacquainted to the outfield and being able to handle that and still hit is going to be the biggest question. Jeremy Vincent, outfield question. With Eli White putting up Profar hopeful numbers, who is more likely to be traded at the deadline, Verdugo or White? I don't see all the options getting playing time, and I assume Harris, Acuña, and Profar will get the starts with a possible platoon in left. If Eli White were to continue to perform the way that he is once Profar returns, maybe at that point you have a little bit of a battle. I don't think either Verdugo or White will be traded. I just don't see a ton of value for either of those guys in a trade. So I don't think either guy gets traded. I could see Verdugo just getting DFA'd at some point. I don't think you're going to get much back in a trade for either one of those guys. So I don't think that's going to come into the equation. I think it'll be more of who's swinging the better bat at that point when Profar becomes, or either one of them swinging a good bat when Profar becomes, and kind of base that on who gets the playing time in left field. But I don't see them trading either one of those guys. Corey Slovic, do you think AA would consider trading Profar at the deadline to a team that won't make the playoffs just to avoid the whole postseason ban conundrum? Well, here's the thing: is Profar still under contract for 2 more years? And what team is really going to trade much of anything for a guy that's missed 80 games due to a PED suspension that you owe $13 million to the next couple of years? Again, I just don't think there's going to be too many teams lining up for that to give you really anything of value in return. Hopefully I'm wrong on that, but I just don't think there's going to be a ton of value in trading Jerickson Profar at this year's trade deadline. If he comes back in July and he has a good finish to the season and he looks more like the guy from last year and you wanted to move on from him in the offseason, then maybe. But if he comes back and he looks like the guy he was from last year, then you've got your left fielder that you signed to begin with. So again, I don't think Profar is getting traded either. Riley Lambert, do you think the Braves trade excess starting pitching to stock up on the farm? We're going to do some more trade podcasts already. A lot of questions on trades. No, and I kind of talked about that early on. Just, again, not too long ago, we were scrambling to find a 4th and a 5th starter. And now those guys have settled in and started to throw well, and we feel pretty good. But your starting pitching depth can evaporate quickly. So I would not trade any excess starting pitching at the moment. Now, if you're talking about prospect-wise, like a Lucas Braun, like a J.R. Ritchie, like a Blake Burkhalter, some of the depth they have at the prospect level, I do think those guys will get traded at some point this season, but not anybody, currently that's been in the major league starting rotation. Calvin Finner says, I'm going to put you on the spot to predict the future. What's the new deal look like for Ronnie, and is it with the Braves? I'd imagine this offseason they try to get one done, and with so much money coming off the books and the opportunity to be in play for Kyle Tucker. If the Braves wanted to go ahead and make Ronnie a Brave for life, which he said several times that he wants to be here, and if he wants to be here, then show them and give the team a pretty team-friendly deal. And what that looks like to me is probably somewhere between $22 to $25 million a year for, through his age 35, 36 season. That's risky on the Braves' part, because you're talking about a guy with, 2 ACL injuries, one on each knee now, and a guy that's most likely going to have to transition to a DH. I think if Acuña is being honest with himself and he sees that as his future, and he knows his future is probably as a primary DH and how that's going to lessen the value of what he could ultimately get, then hopefully that does lead to a more team-friendly contract. But I could see, anywhere between 22 to 25 million, if that's what he wants to do, to just go ahead and get that security. I could see something like that happening. I don't think it's going to happen, at least not this offseason. But, Ronald may want to just take a chance on himself in free agency in a couple of years. There's still, I think, 3 more years left that the Braves have control over him. So there's really no rush. But if the two sides wanted to get together, and like I said, the Braves wanted to make him a Brave for life, Ronald wants to go ahead and get that security, knowing he already has major surgery on both knees, I could see something like that coming together. Caden Hurd, who's your number one trade deadline target for the Braves, and who are you trading for him? Haven't looked that far into it yet, but like I said, we're going to have to do some trade podcasts coming up pretty soon. We're not even into June yet. Already a lot of trade talk, but it would be whoever the top reliever is. I still think getting a setup man, somebody who could close if needed, I still think is the biggest need for the Braves at the deadline. Isaac Rayfield, do you think Drake Baldwin deserves a Michael Harris, Spencer Strider type of extension? So while I don't feel comfortable giving starting pitchers like AJ Smith-Shawver extensions like we talked about earlier, I would be okay if they wanted to give Drake Baldwin a Michael Harris type of extension. Now, I want to see a little bit more from him, but I'd be okay with it. Again, I don't think it's something that's necessary, but I do think it is something that maybe you consider as the season goes on. And if that happens, then maybe it does lead you down a path of trading Sean Murphy. Justin Winter, when Ozuna hit a home run the other day against the Nationals to make it a 3-1 ball game, I noticed when he was rounding first, the coaching staff wasn't acting like they could care less. Do you think those in coaching leadership positions aren't motivating our players enough? I don't know. I think you'd really have to be in the trenches with a team to be able to answer that question, and none of us are. I think the coaches are as motivated as anybody to want to win ball games. So it's hard. That would be making a judgment call from 90 million thousand feet away, and I'm just not going to do that. I think the coaching staff and all these players know how much is riding on each game, and they very much want to win. Their jobs are dependent on it. So I think they very much want to win. Final one here from Mike Brooks. With an ownership that isn't willing to help, a front office that is unable to help, what can the Braves do if this austerity program continues into 2026? So for the first time ever in the history of this Mailbag podcast, I had to look up the definition of a word because I did not know what austerity meant. So let's read it real quick. Fun definition of the day here with Jake. Austerity, sternness or severity of manner or attitude, extreme plainness and simplicity of style or appearance, conditions characterized by severity, sternness, or I don't even know that word either. See, there's my journalism major is not coming out here, but there's also been a little bit of news today, and I am not the business guy either, but there has been some news that the Braves might have to be paying a lot of money here coming up pretty soon. That article over on The Athletic by Bloomberg, the Atlanta Braves, the country's only publicly traded Major League Baseball team, is facing off against that U.S. tax code in a lonely battle that threatens to cost the franchise millions. So there might be some more going on behind the scenes, and I haven't read that article by Bloomberg. You don't have subscription to do so, but it sounds like the Braves front office and could be spending a lot of money here coming up soon. So maybe that's why we've seen them be so hesitant to spend a lot of money on the team. But I don't know. I mean, it's still one of the top payrolls in all of baseball. They've still spent more money than they have in the past, although I know it's down this year compared to last year. I just think it is what it is, and that's kind of what you have to deal with. I do think after this year, I think next offseason, if we don't see them spend big, and this was kind of my talking point during the offseason, if you wanted to get under the tax this year, okay, that's fine. But if you then follow that up with another offseason and you don't spend a lot, and that's kind of what Mike is asking here, is what if this continues into 2026? If this were to continue into 2026 after you clearly didn't make moves to help the team a ton this offseason to stay under the tax, I'd be a little bit worried. So we'll see what happens in the offseason if this team and this front office and they really, are pulling back the money part of it a little bit, then I'd be concerned. I understand why maybe they'd want to get under the tax, although I don't think the benefit is really worth it. But again, if they're doing that and then they don't go spend big next offseason, then I'm going to be up in arms. I'll be a little upset, as I know many of you will be too. All right, that'll do it for all the questions today. Thank you so much, as always, for sending in all of those great questions. I think we finished with over 20 this week, so thank you so much for that. Thank you to Carlos Ray, Lav S, Richard, Carlos Paulino, Sugar Brown in here as well, Jeff Weisner in here, who says trade Acuña, he's overrated. No, absolutely not. I can't wait to have Acuña back. Very excited for his return. But thank you all for joining me here today. Bo from 518, haven't seen you in a while. Thanks so much for joining here today. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button, all those good things. Me and Lindsay will be back on the postcast this weekend covering the Red Sox series. So make sure you subscribe here to Locked On Braves on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and we will talk to you next time.